Tonight, Rishi Sunak says he's hurt and angry after a Reform campaigner is recorded making racist comments about the Prime Minister. Police say they're urgently addressing the recording, while Mr Sunak says Mr Farage has questions to answer. I'll be speaking to the former Defence Secretary, Liam Fox, who tells me Reform have been exposed. Also tonight, President Biden admits he doesn't debate as well as he used to in a fiery speech addressing concerns about his age after last night's TV debate with Donald Trump. And we'll discuss how a Labour government will be looking at events across the Atlantic and how it might deal with a Trump administration. And as Glastonbury gets underway properly, we've been backstage to hear what artists there make of the election. All that and more with our panel, Ben Bradshaw and Mercy Muroki, who'll be with me for the next hour. It's Friday, I'm Ali Fortescue, live from Westminster, and this is the Politics Hub. Hello, good evening. Welcome to the Politics Hub. Well, with just a few days until the general election, I think today was the most raw and the most angry that we've seen the Prime Minister. He talked about his daughters and about protecting his family as he responded to a recording of an activist from Reform, calling, as Sunak himself put it, a P-word. Nigel Farage said that the comments caught on an undercover camera were very wrong, but went on to claim that it was part of a setup. But the Reform leader, so often on the attack, is now on the defence. The question being asked now, does the Reform Party have a deeper problem? Well, Sky's Darren McCaffrey has our top story this evening.
Looks very yummy. Do you think I can take some home with me?
No!
Oh, no!
Campaigning today in a Teesside school, an emotional Prime Minister confronted head-on what he viewed as a very personal racist attack on him and his family.
Yeah, well, my two daughters have to see and hear Reform people who campaign for Nigel Farage calling me an effing. It hurts and it makes me angry, and I think he has some questions to answer. And I don't repeat those words lightly. You know, I do so deliberately because this is too important not to call out clearly for what it is.
Off camera later, Rishi Sunak claimed he hated repeating that racist slur, but felt it was necessary in reaction to a Reform canvasser filmed by an undercover reporter making a series of racist remarks.
Always a bit of Tory vote. What annoys me is he got in. What's good is he? You tell me, you know, he's just wet. What, Sunak? Useless.
For Nigel Farage, this is more than a massive political distraction. After early campaign poll gains, support for Reform has begun to stall. And this latest controversy is likely to do further damage.
All political parties encourage volunteers. You get people like that. Mr Parker will not be welcome back, but hey, you know what? He's put a statement out already saying his views, he knows, are not mine.
Nigel Farage has claimed the volunteer, who's an actor in his spare time, was acting in the undercover footage, a claim strenuously denied by the production company and the man himself. Andrew Parker told Sky News he was just a volunteer delivering leaflets, but that he felt set up and goaded on by the undercover reporter, claiming, "I still use old words, there's no racism at all in it, and I still support Nigel Farage."
And this way as well, please, Nigel.
That support for people accused of racism has dogged Nigel Farage for lots of his political career. This election has been no different, with problems around vetting candidates. One this week was suspended for previous membership of the BNP. Despite attempts by Reform today to cast doubt on the legitimacy of the story, it's making people in battleground Basildon think again.
Reform I can't even talk about, after what was said tonight as well. Disgraceful.
That's not on, that's not what we're looking for. We're looking for a party to come in and actually start looking after the people that live in England, whatever colour.
It had nothing to do with Reform. He was a volunteer. So all they're doing is throwing things to try and make things stick.
Both major political parties have had to confront racism in recent years. But for Reform, it appears to be a continuing problem, and one that seems certain to cost them votes next week. Darren McCaffrey, Sky News, Teesside.
Well, our political correspondent, Darren McCaffrey, has been travelling the country with the Prime Minister. You can see him on that bus now. Train, I should say. Darren, I hope that your line's going to work, but tell us a bit about what the mood has been today. I mean, we could see the Prime Minister there really angry, but there's politics here too, isn't there?
There is definitely politics, but there is personal. And as you say, I've been with the Prime Minister a lot over the last 5 weeks, up and down the country, dozens of visits, dozens of questions. I have not seen him as angry on one issue as he was today. Maybe understandably, so he talked an awful lot about his family, didn't he? But he also talked, and he made a very deliberate decision to say that racial slur in that interview a little bit earlier. And he said he hates doing it. He hates repeating those words, but he felt it was necessary to do so, to kind of call it out. So, there was personal hurt there, and as I say, entirely understandable. But there is politics, Ali, as you've rightly pointed out, at play here too. The Conservative Party have clearly been very concerned with the rise of reform ever since Nigel Farage essentially entered the election race 4 weeks ago. Their poll numbers have gone up and up, though stalled somewhat, I would suggest, this week. And they are hoping, the Conservative Party, by placing emphasis on this, by the Prime Minister calling this out and suggesting, this is something that has continually come up in reform over the last year or so, that it will make some of those Conservative voters think again. It will make people next week go, what, are we comfortable with that? Now, Nigel Farage will deny reform as a racist party. He's also today suggesting lots of allegations that actually this is a setup, that this actor was being paid, something, as I say, the actor and indeed Channel 4 have denied. But he is trying to undermine the legitimacy of the story, if you like, and is posing questions. He'll do that tonight in a debate on the BBC later. But as I say, for the Conservative Party, this is an attempt to try and, I think, stop the support from drifting towards reform, and they will hope that next week people will reassess the potential support for Nigel Farage.
OK, that line just about held up. Thank you so much, Darren McCaffrey, there from the train, as he was saying. A very personal response from the Prime Minister today. Well, let's get some more reaction from the Conservatives. A little earlier, I spoke to the former Defence Secretary, Cillian Fox. Thanks so much for coming on the Politics Hub. Now, I need to ask you first about this story about reform, this racial slur that was used against Rishi Sunak. He is clearly very angry. What's your reaction today?
I think it's horrible. And I think that we've seen examples today from comments that reform candidates have made in the past that really are quite disgraceful. And I remember at the beginning of the campaign, I think we might have discussed it on this very programme, when Nigel Farage had said about Rishi Sunak that he didn't, quote, understand our culture. And I think when you have that sort of dog whistle politics, you shouldn't be surprised if occasionally the dog bites you, which is what's happened, I think, to reform on this occasion.
You say it's horrible. You're clearly not happy with the comments. I mean, do you think there's a kind of wider cultural problem in reform? Is this kind of institutional racism within the Reform Party?
I'm not really qualified to be able to make a comprehensive judgment on that, except from what I've seen. I found it extremely unpleasant. And I think that sort of tone, that sort of way of speaking about other people has no place in our politics. And I understand exactly why Rishi Sunak would feel deeply offended. It's not the sort of thing that you would want to have your children from the same background here. And I think that we've now seen reform exposed. I think that we've seen other things, the comments about Ukraine, which certainly have cut through to voters. I think make reform an unsuitable party to be represented in the House of Commons.
You say you're not kind of qualified to talk about that, but I guess, do you think it's a case of one bad apple, or is this a broader cultural problem in the Reform Party?
Well, it does seem to be a broader problem, because we've seen it from a number of candidates. Some of the things that they put out on social media, we've seen them reported today in various parts of the press. And it does strike me that this is a group that is actually appealing to some of the most unpleasant and base instincts of parts of the country. And I hope that voters totally reject them. I think that their view of Britain is a distorted one, just as their view of the world is a distorted one, as they showed in the comments that we that they said about the West provoking the war in Ukraine, which a number of people have told me they found really quite upsetting and deeply regrettable.
Do you think this goes back to Nigel Farage? Because I guess, he's come out, he's condemned this. Do you think these are sort of bad eggs that are distanced from Farage, or do you think this comes back to him?
Well, he was the one who made the comments about Ukraine. He was the one who made the comments about Rishi Sunak not understanding our culture. So he certainly can't divorce himself from the party. Though Reform's not a proper party, in my view, in any case. They don't seem to have much organisation on the ground, except in one or two little parts of the country, and have little chance of winning seats in the general election.
But you won't go so far as to say that it's an institutionally racist party, is that right?
Well, I think it's a deeply unpleasant party. I think we've seen that it's got deeply unpleasant individuals, but more importantly, I think the worldview of reform is really quite dangerous because, for example, if you take what they were saying about Ukraine and extrapolate that, what they in fact are saying is that Western European countries should be able to exercise sovereignty as democratic states. They should be allowed to choose which allies they have and how they organise their defences. But countries that were in the Warsaw Pact, countries in Eastern Europe, should not have the same freedoms because it might upset Russia. But just what sort of worldview is that?
We need to move on because there's a lot to cover today. There are rumours that you could become a kind of caretaker prime minister. The polls are pretty clear at this stage. We're not far off the end of the election campaign, and it looks like it is going to be a Labour victory if the polls are right. Is that something that you would be willing to do, become a caretaker prime minister?
Well, first of all, as you well know, I don't like questions that begin with if. And I've always thought as a doctor, it's a very good idea not to have a post-mortem while the patient's still alive. So let's the voters make their own judgments next Thursday, and we will deal with whatever circumstances we have afterwards.
But would you be comfortable doing that? It feels like people in the party want a kind of steady hand to steady the ship, if you like, someone that's been in the party a long time, and your name has been one that's been bandied around. I mean, would you be comfortable in that role?
Well, it's very flattering, but as I say, we have to wait and let the voters make the decision. And this idea that we can predetermine what the voters are going to do, I think doesn't show sufficient respect for the electorate, and I'm willing to let them make their judgment first. We will, as politicians, always have to listen to the message that they give us.
Okay, I want to ask you about the debate in America last night between Joe Biden and Donald Trump. What was your reaction when you watched it?
I did not find it an encouraging spectacle. And I think that you can look at it from the American domestic political viewpoint. It did not look as though Joe Biden was properly focused on the subjects that he was being asked about, and Donald Trump wasn't exactly sticking to the issues either. But I think that more seriously, and to go back really to an earlier point that we discussed, it's not just the American voters who are watching that debate. It will also be the Iranians. It will also be the Russians. It will also be the Chinese. And I think that they will be taking from that debate that President Biden didn't appear to be properly focused. His team have said that he was perhaps unwell, perhaps he had a cold. But if I were a Democrat in the United States today, I would be taking a long, hard look at whether there was a potential other candidate.
Okay, so Liam Fox, thanks so much for joining us again on the Politics Hub. Liam Fox speaking to me there. Now, don't forget, you can catch up with our Politics Hub Leaders Interview series online. We're still hoping to speak to the Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, but to see the series so far, please just scan the QR code on your screen right now. Right, let's bring in our duo for tonight, shall we? The former Labour Cabinet Minister, Sir Ben Bradshaw, and former Government Advisor, Mercy Muroki. Delighted to have you on the show. Let's start by talking about this reform story, this racial slur used against the Prime Minister. I mean, Mercy used to be a Government Advisor on race. I thought really interesting that the Prime Minister chose to repeat the P word himself. That felt like, he said it made him angry to have to do that.
Yes, absolutely. And I'm sure it's not the first time he would have experienced being called that. And I think what we saw from the Prime Minister was a much more personal, much more human side, perhaps, than we're used to. I mean, the comments that this volunteer made were obviously inexcusable. I don't think there's any person in their right mind who would try to defend them. On one hand, I understand that, OK, he's a volunteer, he's not officially affiliated with Reform, but I think the response from Nigel Farage and the official response from Reform really is what we should be looking at. And I think it was incredibly disappointing, actually, that Nigel Farage chose not to show leadership and strongly condemn what was said and distance himself completely from this, but actually has chosen to go down the line of, oh, well, it's a setup, he's an actor, which almost sounds like he is almost excusing it. So I'm very disappointed in that. However, I don't think it's a reflection of all Reform voters. I mean, they're at around 20% in the polls. I don't think 20% of voters would have such abhorrent views, but it's very disappointing from Reform.
What did you think, Ben?
Well, I was very welcome. I think it's very welcome that Rishi Sunak called this out so strongly, the racism that was directed against him, because I've been rather worried by what seems to be the Conservative Party allowing itself to be dragged further in the Reform direction during this campaign to try to shore up their vote on that wing. I only wish that Rishi Sunak had been so outspoken in his condemnation of Frank Hester, the Tory party's biggest donor, after his comments, racist comments about Diane Abbott. And of course, the Tory party, since those comments, has now taken another huge donation from Mr Hester. So a bit of consistency, I think, would be welcome here as well.
Yeah, it does seem like something had sort of snapped for the Prime Minister. I mean, do you think we're so used to seeing Nigel Farage like on the attack, and I think it's fair to say things were going quite well. Their polling was certainly doing very well. Do you think this is kind of the beginning of the end of Reform, Ben?
Well, I'm afraid to say that from my experience on the doorstep, those voters who are telling me they're voting Reform seem to be very resolute about it. And I mean, I think the polls are probably quite accurate about the Reform vote really eating into the Conservative vote. But I think it's good for all of us and for our politics and our democracy that Mr Farage is now subjecting himself to scrutiny, because he's never really been scrutinised as a serious politician before. That's now happening and is not enjoying it very much, I don't think.
Do you think it's a wider problem in the Reform Party, Mercy?
Well, I should hope not. I mean, it did very much concern me that these comments this volunteer was saying were said so flippantly in the presence of people he clearly didn't know very well, which suggests that there's almost comfort with expressing those sorts of views. So that does worry me. But, you know, I don't think, again, there's lots of people who are former Conservative voters, perhaps a fewer people who are former Labour voters who are flocking to Reform because they feel disillusioned, they don't trust politicians, and many people do have very legitimate reasons for wanting a third party that they feel represents them. So I don't want to dismiss everybody en masse who's going to vote to Reform, but I would hope that, you know, they take some more leadership on this issue and completely distance themselves from characters like this.
Thank you both. We're going to come back to you later, but really interesting discussion. Well, let's hear now from the Labour Party. There's obviously lots to discuss, the reaction to this story and, of course, events in the United States as well, and the challenge for Keir Starmer's party, should they find themselves in government next week, how they'll manage the UK's special relationship with the US and how to deal with both Joe Biden and Donald Trump. I'm pleased to say that the Shadow Minister for Industry and Decarbonisation, Sarah Jones, joins me now. We will come on to events in the US in a moment, but first I would just like to get your reaction to this story about the Reform campaigner today and the racial slur that was used.
Well, I think it's really grim, isn't it? Really grim for our politics in the middle of an election to hear such awful things. And I really hope that Nigel Farage looks to his own leadership and what kind of party he is running. Whether it's widespread, who knows? We don't know. But the fact that these comments were made openly and without anybody thinking that they would be challenged is quite extraordinary. And there's no room for those kind of views in politics. And I hope that Nigel Farage looks very carefully at the party that he's leading and the leadership he's providing that is enabling people to feel it's okay for them to say those kind of horrible things.
You say you'd like Nigel Farage to look carefully at the party. I guess what exactly would that involve? What would you like to see from the Reform leader?
Well, I think, as Ben just said, he's getting some scrutiny now in terms of his views, and we've seen that on his views on Russia and Ukraine as well. But cultures in organisations come very much from the top, and if he is serious, which it doesn't appear that he is actually, because he's flip-flopping between saying, well, these comments were wrong, and then saying, well, it was implying it was some kind of setup. He needs to own what's happened, take responsibility for it, and stamp anything like that out within his party. And I think the scrutiny that he's now under is good. It's quite right that we're looking at him and understanding what he thinks about the world and about all these issues. But you know that we have to just have a really hard line about racism, and he needs to be really clear about that, and he hasn't been so far.
Let's move on to what's been going on in the US. I'm just keen to get your reaction on that debate between Joe Biden and Donald Trump. What did you make of it?
Well, obviously, it was a difficult watch for lots of different reasons, and it will be for the American people to decide who they want to run their country, and it will be for whoever forms the next government to have as strong a relationship with the US as we can, for lots of reasons. Of course, because of the global security and the allies that we have, for trade, for climate change. And for us to be able to focus on issues like what's happened in the Middle East, and we can play our role. So it will always be really important for Britain to have a really close relationship with America, whoever is in charge.
Did you have any concerns about Joe Biden's performance?
No, it's not for me to question his ability or his performance or anything like that. What it's for me to do is to state that if there was a Labour government, we would want to build relationships and to work really closely with America, which has been an ally for such a long time and is such an important player on the world stage. And it's important for our trade and our place in the world too.
You say you want to build relationships with whatever party wins. It feels like we sort of woke up today after that debate to the real prospect of a Donald Trump second presidency. How would that be for Labour? Do you think it's going to be a problem that you have a shadow foreign secretary with a track record of being pretty blatant in his criticism of Donald Trump?
Look, I think the role of a Labour government, as you would expect any government to be, is to do what's right for our country and what's right for the world. And I think most observers would say that over the last few years, the Conservative government has not played the role on the world stage that we could have done, whether that's showing leadership on climate or whether that is on issues of the day and the kind of influence that we can have. And I think a Labour government would be really clear that we want to build those strong relationships. We want to do what's in the national interest, but we also want to play our role when it comes to international aid, when it comes to climate change and all those other issues where we need our allies to come together and find solutions to what are issues that cross nation boundaries and affect everyone.
OK, Sarah Jones, thanks so much for coming on the Politics Hub this evening. You're watching the Politics Hub. Coming up. Political debate and Glastonbury Festival go hand in hand, but what do some of the artists performing this year think about our politicians? We've been finding out. Plus, we'll have more reaction and analysis to last night's US presidential debate in the race for the White House, with dismay among Democrats.
I done it 7 times, so a full lap will count as just 1 up and down. So you need to complete it in 24 hours. I got the record a few years back. I done in 21 hours 49 minutes. A year later, I lost the record to a friend from Inverness, who completed it the same amount of laps, 7, but 40 minutes faster than me. So I waited a year and I had another go for it, and I managed to get another 20 minutes off his time. So now it's back with me. It sounds weird because it's 7, but you really need to have to time it right, because if you go past the 24-hour marks, it doesn't really count. Records are there to be broken, you know. I like to push myself. I like to find out how far I can go, how high I can go. That was just an idea that came to my head in one of my runs. That's what I think of when I'm going training, running in the hills around the house. Just my mind wanders away and thinks what to do next, and that was one of them.
Presumably, it is almost possible to fit 8 laps in 24 hours. Is that a target of yours at some point or not?
Yes, definitely is. I had a chance a few weeks back, but I had to just call it a day. I had the record in my hands and my knees were really sore. They're just more than normal, so I didn't want to risk it. I just played it safe. I'll be back.
Hello, welcome back. Well, the fallout continues from Joe Biden's faltering performance in last night's presidential debate against Donald Trump. Some Democrats are now openly calling for the president to consider standing aside, despite having already wrapped up the party's nomination to fight for re-election come November. The main issue for many was not just his hoarse voice, the stuttering answers, or the distant look, but Biden's inability to effectively call out his opponent for a string of lies and misinformation. In the last hour, we've been hearing again from the president at an event in North Carolina. But first, let's bring you up to date with what happened last night. Here's our US correspondent, James Matthews.
The morning after the debate before, and the mist hung heavy over Atlanta. It didn't cloud a clear-eyed and cold assessment that chilled the Democratic Party. 90 minutes had been a long watch in politics.
Now, please welcome the 46th President of the United States, Joe Biden.
It was America's big night.
How are you?
The political spectacle with the high stakes.
Donald Trump.
With their history, there was no handshake. There was hostility.
My son was not a loser, was not a sucker. You're the sucker. You're the loser.
Without question, the worst president, the worst presidency in the history of our country.
The debate between two old foes had put the question of infirmity centre stage. From an 81-year-old president, there were contributions that kept it there.
Making sure that we're able to make every single solitary person eligible for what I've been able to do with the with the COVID. With dealing with everything we have to do with. Look.
Then there was this on a question about immigration.
The total initiative relative to what we can do with more Border Patrol and more asylum officers.
President Trump?
I really don't know what he said at the end of that sentence. I don't think he knows what he said either. Look.
It was the look and sound of a headline already written as the debate continued. They talked Donald Trump's recent criminal conviction.
The only person at this stage is a convicted felon is the man I'm looking at right now. You have the morals of an alley cat.
Give you a minute, sir.
I didn't have sex with a porn star. No.
There were questions on world affairs.
And Kim Jong-un and President Xi of China, Kim Jong-un of North Korea, all of these, Putin, they don't respect him. They don't fear him. They have nothing going with this gentleman, and he's going to drive us into World War III.
The TV debate was triggered by Team Biden, designed to showcase strength and offer reassurance about the abilities of a Democratic president. Rather, it has imbued the party with a sense of crisis. Democrats who previously wouldn't listen to questions around infirmity are now openly calling for change at the top of the ticket, concerned at how bad Biden was and how bad he might get. For Democrats, it was a night to defend and deflect, and it wasn't easy.
I'm not going to spend all night with you talking about the last 90 minutes when I've been watching the last 3.5 years of performance.
Joe Biden went for waffles after the TV debate. not before a quick stage appearance with his wife, the First Lady. Not as awkward as the debate itself, but perhaps not far off. As bad a night as it was for the president, the Biden campaign insists he will absolutely not be stepping down, stating that he's the only person to have beaten Donald Trump and he'll do it again. He hasn't made his own job any easier. James Matthews, Sky News in Atlanta, Georgia.
Well, in the last hour, President Biden has come out and given a very contrasting speech to last night with much more energetic performance at a rally in North Carolina. Let's take a listen, shall we?
I don't walk as easy as I used to. I don't speak as smoothly as I used to. I don't debate as well as I used to. But I know what I do know. I know how to tell the truth. I know right from wrong. And I know how to do this job. I know how to get things done. And I know, like millions of Americans know, when you get knocked down, you get back up.
Well, let's get some reaction, shall we, from our US correspondent, James Matthews, who was listening in. I mean, where are we, James Matthews? I mean, do you think that Joe Biden's position is any clearer after that speech?
I think clarity actually is something that's come to the fore in the past 24 hours, Ali. Clarity on his future and a clarity and certainty that he shouldn't be at the top of the ticket. That's what many Democrats have been saying overnight and into this morning. Democrats I've been speaking to, trying to get elected come November and beyond, they're saying, look, the struggle is real. And as they say here, the struggle just got realer. Because I'm trying to sell myself. I go and speak to voters about my record, my opponent's record. All they have wanted to talk about and will want to talk about more is Biden, infirmity, frailty. How can this man have the stamina, energy and durability to occupy the Oval Office and everything that means for domestic politics, but also world politics at a time when America is enmeshed in world conflict. And Republicans are making the point very strongly that he is a weakness at the heart of government. And the benefactors of that are Putin, Kim Jong-un, and all the rest of it. So that's the Republican argument. It's being echoed, actually, in the ranks of the Democratic Party, a party who up until now had privately expressed concern, but were happy to live with Biden as long as he didn't, well, screw it up. And screw it up he did last night. The difficulty he's got, as energetic as he was today, and he was, different crowd, different Biden in North Carolina amongst the party faithful, with an audience giving him time to reset, I suppose, on the comeback trail already, a comeback trail that's just got steeper. Different Joe Biden. What he clearly has to do is to channel some of that energy from here until November. Remember Ronald Reagan? You may not. In 1984, he had 2 presidential debates. You won't remember the debate, you'll remember Reagan. The first one, he wasn't great, and he was written off by many. The second debate, he performed much better, and of course, duly won high office. So I suppose that's a scenario that Biden might be looking at, but timing's tight, and the polls are tight. He's in a difficult situation, there's no doubt, but he's not dropping out. That's the very clear word from Team Biden today. They have said that he's absolutely not going to take a step back. They say that he's the only person to have beaten Donald Trump, and he'll do it again. The risk, I suppose, Ali, is, having styled himself as the one man who can beat Donald Trump last night, he styled himself as possibly the only man in the Democratic Party who cannot beat Donald Trump, and that would be quite the legacy to hand victory to the Republican Party and to Donald Trump in particular at a time when many in his own party are saying step down for the greater good.
Thanks so much, James Matthews, there with the view from the US. Well, let's have a chat, shall we, about how this is all going down domestically and bring in Claire Ainsley, who was, of course, the Executive Director of Policy for Sir Keir Starmer and is now Director at the Progressive Policy Institute. I'm sure you watched that debate. I guess it sort of felt today like we woke up to the real prospect of the next Donald Trump presidency. How do you think the Labour Party are kind of feeling about that?
Well, I think this has been a possibility for some time, ever since Trump said that he was going to be standing again and got the Republican nomination. We've known that this point might come, and the Democrats have known for a long time that it's a possibility. And of course, it's certainly not all over. Not only has Biden done a kind of more fiery comeback today, but we've got a lot to play out with Trump. He's still obviously in the middle of these court cases, so we don't know how the American public will respond. But Labour will certainly be thinking they will deal with whoever it is in the White House, and they've been very sensible, I think, about looking outwards and making sure they're building relationships across all the teams.
And tell me a bit about how that kind of works behind the scenes, the building of relationships, because I guess, do you think it's problematic for the Labour Party that Donald Trump and David Lammy, I think it's fair to say, are not kind of natural bedfellows? David Lammy has actually been very explicit in the past in his criticism of Donald Trump.
Well, David Lammy has been at pains to make sure that he's building those relationships. And I think actually the Labour team, all of the shadow foreign affairs team, have really been out and present, not just obviously in North America, but around the world.
It's hard to build that bridge, I guess.
It might be hard to build that bridge, but I think there's definitely a readiness on the part of other governments to be able to have somewhat of a reset in the UK. So I think in the end, the US-UK relationship is going to be extremely important. And actually, it's about common interests, and primarily that will be, in the first instance, about backing for NATO and obviously for Ukraine.
Let's bring in our panel, shall we? Because there's lots of interesting voices here today, Ben Bradshaw and Mercy Moroki. Ben, I'm interested to hear from you. I mean, do you think David Lammy's kind of past comments about Trump, I think he called him a neo-Nazi sympathiser at one moment, do you think that's going to be
I don't, and I think David Cameron's been just as rude about Trump in the past, hasn't he? Look, I think Claire's absolutely right. What I would say, and that's because I'm sort of beyond my political career now, is I don't think it's any secret that probably most Labour people, and actually most members of the current government, would rather work with a Democrat president than with a Trump president. But you deal with whoever the American people deliver as president, and you have to deal with that administration in our national interest. So, you know, this is an agonising dilemma for the Democrats, I think, now after last night's debate. We'll have to see how that pans out. But, you know, a Labour party that's serious about government has to be prepared to deal with whoever is in the White House, as I say, in our national interest. And I also think that it could actually make Britain's role more important if we have a Labour government with a reasonable majority, a stable situation here, in contrast to perhaps what's happening in the States and much of the rest of Europe. We could again become a bit more of a player in the world, which I would welcome, certainly. I think we've taken a bit of a back seat diplomatically in recent years.
Do you think Labour will take more of a front seat diplomatically, Mercy?
Well, they're certainly not going to get along with Trump. We all know that, I think. And I think it's guaranteed that Trump, more or less now, if things don't go after he's being sentenced, I don't know what will happen following that. But Trump is incredibly popular. I think after the debate there, the CNN Snap poll showed him two-thirds ahead. Two-thirds of people thought that he'd actually won that. And let's not forget, yes, he's a convicted felon, but I think the Republican Party said they raised £40 million 24 hours, within 24 hours after the conviction. So I think whichever party is going to be in power, and let's assume it's Labour, they're going to have to face the fact that Trump is likely going to be the president, and they will have to maintain that special relationship, especially given how fragile, the state of global relations and diplomacy is right now.
And Claire, I mean, Keir Starmer would have to, if he does win, hit the ground running. I think you've got NATO anniversary on the 10th of July. You've got he's going to be hosting European leaders for the European Parliament Summit. It's going to be a steep learning curve, isn't it?
He's ready. I mean, you can just see in Keir Starmer that he is ready to be Prime Minister if that's what the voters decide next week. But he has said, and the Labour team have said, there are a lot of people who are still undecided, and I'm not as confident as Mercy is about the outcome of the American election. Actually, it's for the American people to decide. They may have to decide on the basis of seeing whether they're prepared to have somebody who is a convicted felon as their president, and I wouldn't want to call it just yet with that level of confidence. I think we have to see how that plays out. Likewise, in the UK, voters are going to go to the polls, and Starmer's ready, but we have to ourselves ask the question, if we want change, then people are going to have to go and make that happen, because nothing is done until the voters decide.
I mean, with Trump, though, there are concerns over NATO. I mean, that must be something that they're thinking about.
Yeah, and there's concerns, and there's not just concerns from the UK's point of view, the other NATO members, of course. But I also noticed how Trump had moderated some of his positions on it. So I think it'll be quite interesting to see how it plays out. But I agree with what Ben said, that actually there will be a welcoming if we're able to take our place on that stage again, if we're able to play our role in really having some collaborative answers in this very difficult time where things really are insecure globally. I think having a UK that takes its part is probably about the right time.
OK, let's go back to our panel very briefly.
I think one of the other dynamics, if Trump wins and if his is bad on NATO and Ukraine and climate, as some of his statements suggest he might be, then actually having a Labour government here that's more able to forge closer security ties with Europe, we're going to have to stick together closely in Europe if Trump gets the presidency and does what he's threatened to do, could also be in Britain's national interest, given that dynamic.
And on Europe, you know, Mercy, like we're about to have the not presidential race, I should say the parliamentary race in France. If Marine Le Pen's party gets a majority in the French parliament, is that going to be a worry? There are warnings that could impact the UK economy. And Labour could potentially even see her win a presidential race in 2027.
Well, I think the shape of politics across the West is definitely changing, and we're going to have to deal with that new reality. We've seen the rise of populism. Some would argue we're seeing that in this country. And so the way different factions across the West and different politicians of different colours work together will have to change. And that's a new reality all the parties will have to adapt to. But I think we can all agree it's in everybody's interests for that cooperation to continue, because we are in incredibly risky times globally.
OK, thank you both, and thank you also to Claire. It was really interesting to talk to you on the Politics Hub this evening, and we will be coming back to our panel with something slightly lighter later, coming up next on the Politics Hub. Britain could soon have its most diverse parliament ever, but how will voters from ethnically diverse communities behave at the ballot box? Hello, welcome back. Well, an exclusive Sky News YouGov poll has revealed the voting intentions of ethnically diverse communities in the UK. For many, the war in Gaza came out as a top priority, and despite concerns over Sir Keir Starmer's handling of the situation, Labour still performed higher than the Conservatives. Our political correspondent Gurpreet Narwan reports.
The voting trends of ethnically diverse communities are incredibly complex and sometimes hard to predict. But with less than a week to go until Election Day, polling can give useful insights into how voters from ethnically diverse communities are feeling about the main political parties. Firstly, let's look at how they plan to vote. And as you can see here, the data is noticeably different from the national picture. Labour has historically fared well with voters from ethnically diverse communities, and 53% of voters we polled said they would vote for the party. That's a greater lead than the polls we have with the general population. Now, the Tories, well, they're faring worse among voters from ethnic minority communities. You can see that they're at 14%, which is neck and neck with the Green Party. Now, if we drill into the detail, we can see that 32% of British Indians said they would vote Conservatives. That's 12 points higher than the general population. So there is a lot of variation between communities. Reform UK, well, they polled much worse with ethnic minority voters than the population at large. They're on 7%, but they're still 1 point above the Liberal Democrats. So what issues do ethnic minority voters care about? And is it all that different to society as a whole? Well, the cost of living is the highest priority for these voters. And if we compare that to polling done for all voters across the UK, well, here it's the NHS that comes out on top, with the cost of living second. The starkest difference is on housing, which ranks much higher for the group made up of ethnic minorities, and the conflict in Gaza and Israel, which 41% of British Pakistanis and Bangladeshis marked as a priority. Now, we've previously reported on how both parties have suffered from what polling experts have described as a Gaza effect. But for Labour, more than half of all ethnic minority voters we polled think Labour has dealt with the Israel and Gaza issue badly. That's more than the general population. And within the Pakistani and Bangladeshi community, it's a lot higher, at 78%, who don't think Labour has performed well, despite the party now calling for a ceasefire. But does this matter to Labour? Although the party's foreign policy stance has been damaging, it's important to note that overall support for Labour among ethnic minorities, including Pakistanis and Bangladeshis, is still higher than it is across the population as a whole. But the party isn't being complacent. Labour's campaign app has been directing activists to help defend 16 constituencies, most of which have majority diverse communities. And one seat on that list is surprising: Shabana Mahmood's constituency of Birmingham Ladywood. It should be one of Labour's safest seats in the UK, with a majority of over 28,000. But with a high number of voters who care passionately about the conflict in the Middle East, Labour now appear to be campaigning defensively here. Now, this might not translate into votes, all seats, but what is clear is that Labour support in some areas with high numbers of ethnically diverse communities could be waning long term. And that could be a much bigger problem for the party if, as the polls suggest, they make it into government.
And here is the full list of candidates who will be standing in the constituency of Birmingham Ladywood on the 4th of July. Right, let's bring our panel back in, shall we? Ben, how worried do you think Labour are right now by the Gaza, the so-called Gaza effect?
I don't think we're unduly worried. I think it's right that we're putting resources into some of those seats where this is a particular issue. I mean, it's an issue for much of the population, not just ethnic minorities and Muslims themselves. But obviously it's more acute in those situations. I think fair-minded people understand that, you know, Keir Starmer as a future Prime Minister has to have a foreign policy which is sensible and rational and is aimed at staying close to our main allies, America, France, Germany, if we're going to achieve any progress and change in the Middle East at all. I think we're in a better position than the Conservatives. I've often thought that Rishi Sunak has been a bit too much of a cheerleader for Prime Minister Netanyahu, but on Palestinian state recognition and on the ceasefire, we've been ahead of the Conservatives and are in a better place. So I think it will be okay, but clearly, these are issues that people care about. But in the end, I think, as your graph showed, the things that matter most to everyone in this country are things that affect them personally, the cost of living, the health service, and those are the same for everyone. And of course, the lead we have among ethnic minorities is probably more economic and social based than it is anything to do with race.
And Mercy, I guess, it looks likely that Labour are going to win this election. The problems won't stop there, and because Prime Minister Starmer would still have a lot of pressure internally from his own party on Gaza.
Yeah, he wouldn't. And I think the first thing to say is that the ethnic minority community in the UK, or in England and Wales, as of the last census, is about 15%. So, we're not talking a huge chunk of the population necessarily, not huge enough to sort of, change the vote one way or the other. And the ethnic minority population has always kind of voted steadily for Labour, so I don't think this is any surprise necessarily, and I don't think it will hit them too much. I think, as you said, I think a lot of the issues are social, a lot of the issues are class-based. Ethnic minority communities tend to be more disadvantaged, hence why they would care naturally about issues such as the cost of living and the economy. And the other thing to say is it's not a homogenous group either. As the report there said, I think a third of British Indians will vote Conservative because they're perhaps wealthier than the ethnic minority population. So I don't think it's enough to swing it, but it's a very interesting dynamic.
Thank you both. We will be coming back to you one last time. Now, coming up, political debate and Glastonbury Festival go hand in hand. But what do some of the artists performing this year think about our politicians? We've been finding out.
I'm David Blevins, and I'm Sky's senior Ireland correspondent. I'm based in Belfast, a city transformed by peace, but still struggling with its past. Politically, the two sides are as far apart as ever, and it's over that question of who has sovereignty in Northern Ireland, the very issue that's been the source of tension here for generations. It takes 60 minutes to cross the Irish Sea. It took the British monarchy a century. I've spent 25 years reporting the journey from conflict to peace.
The political parties of Northern Ireland have reached agreement.
We help you understand the world with us.
Today, we have reached an agreement with the Conservative Party on support for government in Parliament.
We already know what the government gets out of this deal. What exactly does the DUP get out of it? Well, £1.5 billion. Welcome to Winterfell. It's an iconic location in this globally acclaimed drama. Ophelia was the most powerful hurricane this far east in the Atlantic on record. You can't live in a place like this and not appreciate the environment.
Hello, welcome back to the Politics Hub. Well, Glastonbury Festival is no stranger to the political debate, having hosted its fair share of MPs and other public figures over the years. But what do some of the artists performing this year think about the general election and our politician? Well, our arts and entertainment correspondent, Katie Spencer, has been finding out.
With less than a week to go before the election, Glastonbury, music to the ears of those who, let's face it, are a bit weary of back-to-back politics. The artists here have come here to provide everyone with a bit of escapism. But what do they make of the politicians' performances? We thought we'd find out.
Well, I know who I'm going to vote for, but I'm not super enthused by any particular outcome, if I'm honest with you.
So is there a song for you that best sums up this year's election?
I'm going to go with Yellow by Coldplay. Ed Davies having a great time.
The party who'll get me my vote will be the party that tax me the highest.
So is there an act or song that sums up the election for you?
Probably The Clash, Working for the Clampdown.
People recognise we really need drastic change around the National Health Service, around housing, around education, around mental health provision for young people. We're not really hearing from the Labour Party a vision of a different way to run society.
Is there an act or a song that best sums up the election? So like Cyndi Lauper, True Colours, Dua Lipa, New Rules?
Yeah, I'll tell Monty Python, always look on the bright side of life.
Life lessons from the good people of Glastonbury. Sit back, relax and enjoy. It'll all be over soon.
A glimpse of Glastonbury there. Not for us, though. Have either of you been to Glastonbury?
Never. Too big. I have been to other festivals. Glastonbury is all rather sort of felt overwhelming.
Well, literary festivals, I'm sure. I think I'm quite obscure in that it doesn't appeal to me whatsoever. I think it's very much targeted towards my demographic, but I don't want to be around hundreds of thousands.
What did you think of what they said? Is this, do you think it's representative?
As we know from Jeremy Corbyn's visit to Glastonbury, the Glastonbury goers, not to be rude about them, are not wholly representative of the British public. He then took us to our worst defeat since 1935. So I hope they have a lot of fun, but I wouldn't take my political wisdom from Glastonbury.
Lovely. I wish we could talk some more, but unfortunately, that is all we've got time for this evening. That's it from us. I'll see you tomorrow at 7. Gillian Joseph is with you next here on Sky News. But from all of us on the Politics Hub, have a lovely evening.